The bar was loud that night. Not unusually so, just the usual post-work crowd filling the air with old war stories and cheap jokes. Cigarette smoke hung like fog beneath the dim amber lights of the veterans' lounge, and the jukebox coughed out some forgotten country tune. Laughter boomed from the corner booth, where 4 aging veterans played cards and traded jabs, like they were still in the barracks. Then the door creaked open. She stepped in alone, the wind following behind her. Like a shadow. Her boots were dusty, her jeans worn, and her jacket looked too thin for the weather outside. But it was her face that drew attention. She had sharp, calm eyes, the kind of eyes that seemed to measure everything in the room before taking another step. The laughter didn't stop, but it faltered, just slightly, enough to be noticed. One of the older men leaned in and chuckled. Well, she must be lost. Probably looking for the yoga studio. That earned a round of laughter, she said. Nothing. Just walked slowly to the counter and sat on the last stool furthest from the group. Her presence, small but steady, unsettled something in the room. Not that she looked threatening. She didn't. She didn't carry herself with bravado or pride, but rather a quiet, alert stillness, like someone who had walked into 100 rooms like this and knew how to handle all of them. Behind the counter, Joe, a bartender with a Vietnam tattoo on one arm and bad knees from a life spent ducking real bullets, looked her over carefully. Something to drink? He asked casually. Just water, she replied. Her voice wasn't timid. It was low, calm, and clipped, like someone used to giving orders that had to be followed fast. Joe squinted slightly. He'd worked this place for 20 years. Seen plenty of phonies, plenty of real ones too. And something about the way she scanned the room, noting exits, checking corners, made him raise an eyebrow. You military? He asked, sliding the glass toward her. I was, she said. The men in the booth started whispering. Bet she did desk work. She looks like a supply clerk. Probably got PTSD from typing reports too fast. Another burst of laughter. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a sip from the glass, eyes forward, staring at her own reflection in the bar's mirror. There was weariness in her face, not exhaustion, but a kind of emotional scar tissue. Joe noticed her hands. Small calluses across the palms, and the faintest trace of what looked like an old burn peeking from beneath her left sleeve. He leaned in, quieter now. Kunar province? Her eyes flicked to him. A silent answer. Joe felt a chill run down his spine. Kunar was no joke. It wasn't somewhere you got stationed, unless you were deep in combat. A place known for ambushes, IEDs, insurgents. He had known 3 men who didn't come back from their dot. Now the mocking didn't feel as funny, but the booth behind her hadn't figured it out yet. One man stood up, clearly emboldened by the beer and group approval. Hey, sweetheart, he called out. You sure you're in the right place? This bar's for people who actually served. She turned to look at him slowly. Not with anger. Not even contempt. Just with cold silence. Joe stepped in. Why don't you sit back down, Frank? Frank scoffed. Come on, I'm just a skin. What unit, huh? You gonna tell us your mouse? Or were you special forces in the office cubicle division? More laughter. She stood up. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. She just stood, pulled back her left sleeve, and set her forearm on the bar. The burn was clearer now. Ugly, jagged, wrapping from her wrist halfway to her elbow. Thick scar tissue and melted skin told a story that none of them expected. The room fell quiet. Then she rolled up her right sleeve, revealing another scar, this one clean and deep, like a knife or shrapnel wound that never quite healed. Silence. Stretched out uncomfortably. Joe cleared his throat. Frank. Sit down. Frank did. She sat again, expression unreadable. I don't owe anyone in this room my story. she said calmly. But don't mistake silence for weakness. A man near the back finally spoke. He was older, one of the quiet regulars who came in twice a week and usually kept to himself. Lily Monroe? He asked hesitantly. Her head turned. She nodded. He leaned back, visibly shaken. I read about you. 2011. Cooner. The convoy ambush. Now heads turned. What ambush? One whispered. Another man pulled out his phone, already searching the name. Her name was starting to click. Lily Monroe. The only survivor of the infamous Ridgeback Ridge ambush. A ranger who dragged 2 men through enemy territory after the convoy was decimated. She'd gone radio silent for 3 days, presumed dead, until she crawled to an extraction point. Broken but alive. Joe stared at her differently now. She said nothing else. Just returned to her glass of water. But no one laughed again that night. By morning, the story had spread. The regulars at Rusty's bar, the same ones who'd mocked her the night before, now sat a little quieter, a little more cautious. Frank, who had made the snide yoga comment, didn't show up at all. Others looked at the entrance every few minutes, as if expecting her to return. She didn't. Not right away, but her name, Sergeant Lily Monroe, was already making its rounds. Someone had pulled up her military record on a veterans database. It wasn't flashy. No headline-grabbing medals. No viral news footage. Just raw data, buried deep. 3 tours. 75th Ranger Regiment. Purple Heart. Distinguished Service Cross, postponed, not accepted. That last bit confused people. Why would anyone decline a medal? Those who understood war already knew the answer. Because some honors feel like reminders. Because some things you survive. You'd rather forget. Joe, the bartender, sat on his stool, arms crossed, eyes on the same stool, where she'd sat. He kept playing the scene in his mind. The way she'd stood, silent. The look in her eyes not to intimidate, but to warn. She hadn't flinched once when knocked. She'd faced it the same way she probably faced enemy fire, with a grim steadiness. Then, the phone calls started. One came from a Colonel Joe used to serve with in Iraq. Another from a veteran coordinator at a VA office. One even came from a former ranger, calling from 2 states away. They'd all heard the same story. And they all said the same thing. If that's really Lily Monroe, treat her with respect. 2 days later, she returned. Same jacket, same boots, same stool. No one spoke as she entered. The regulars glanced at her, but none dared joke. Not after what they'd read. Not after what they'd seen. A few nodded silently. She nodded back. Joe gave her water without asking. You didn't have to come back, he said softly. I didn't leave because I was afraid, she replied. Just tired of noise? He gave a respectful nod. We get that. Then came the voice from the back, an older man named Walt, a Vietnam vet who rarely said much, but was respected like a priest in that place. Why didn't you tell anyone who you were? He asked. Lily looked down for a moment. Then she answered, because I shouldn't have to. Her voice wasn't angry, just worn. I came back to the States, hoping to disappear. I didn't want speeches or stares. I just wanted a place where I didn't have to explain the way I walk, or why I don't laugh at certain jokes. Walt nodded slowly, his hands trembling slightly on the table. I know what you mean. He said, when I got back in 72, I didn't talk about nothing for 10 years. Nobody wanted to hear it anyway. Lily looked at him. They shared a small, unspoken understanding across generations. The silence in the bar that night was different. Not awkward, but respectful. As if the entire place had been forced to reevaluate what it meant to be a veteran. To remember that courage came in many forms, and not all wounds were visible. Frank, finally returned later that week. He came in alone, hat in hand, literally. He didn't go to his usual booth. He walked straight to Lily and stood awkwardly at her side. "I was out of line," he muttered. "Didn't know. Didn't care to know. That's on me." Lily looked at him for a long moment, unreadable. "You were drunk," she said. "Drunk minds speak sober truths. The issue wasn't your beer, it was your ego." Frank swallowed hard. "Understood," he replied. "I'm sorry." She nodded. "I accept that, but not for me. For the others like me, who don't have scars you can see. You mock them too. Every time you open your mouth and assume who deserves to sit in this bar." Frank's lips tightened. He nodded again, and then walked away quietly. That evening, Joe pulled a file from beneath the counter. A laminated article, yellowed from years ago, that he'd saved from the war section of a forgotten newspaper. It told a brief, almost clinical version of her story. But it was enough. Female ranger rescued after 72 hours behind enemy lines. Saved 2 lives, refuses medal. She noticed it and raised an eyebrow. "You kept that?" she asked. "I keep things that matter," he said. "Didn't know it was you." But I remembered her. Lily exhaled through her nose, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. "That wasn't my best moment." "It was someone's last hope," he said. "You carried them. You kept them breathing." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. Later that night, the conversations in the bar changed. They weren't just about war movies or basic training jokes. People started asking questions with more weight. "What's it like, coming home when no one believes you were ever there? Do you ever sleep through the night? Do your scars still hurt?" She answered some. Not all, but enough. One of the younger veterans, Mark, barely 30 and fresh out of his own deployment, sat beside her, quietly listening. When everyone had gone, he finally spoke. "I've got scars too," he said, lifting his shirt to reveal a set of thick pink lines across his ribs. "They look different," Lily said, "but they're the same." Mark nodded. "They laugh at me sometimes, call me soft, say I didn't earn anything." She looked him dead in the eye. "They only laugh because they fear what they don't understand. You survived. You earned more than most." Mark's eyes welled slightly. He wiped them quickly and said, "Thanks, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am," she said. "Call me Lily." That night, a photograph was taken by someone in the bar. It wasn't staged or planned. It was just a picture of Lily sitting beside Mark, both with visible scars, hers on her arm, his on his side, staring into the mirror behind the bar. It was captioned later when someone posted it online. "Strength comes in silence." It went viral in veteran circles, but Lily never saw it. She didn't care for likes or shares. She cared about truth and the fact that for once, someone had listened. Long after the bar emptied, Lily sat in silence, her fingers curled around a cold glass of untouched water. The jukebox had stopped playing. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the soft clink of Joe washing glasses filled the space. Her eyes stayed fixed on the mirror behind the counter, but she wasn't looking at herself. She was seeing Cooner again. It started the same way every time. The crunch of tires on gravel, the sudden explosion, the shriek of twisted metal, and the sharp ringing in her ears that followed. That day in 2011 would never leave her. The convoy had been routine, or so they thought. 4 vehicles rolling through the steep passes of eastern Afghanistan. They were delivering supplies and gathering intel from a local contact. Lily, one of the few women in her unit, was in the 3rd Humvee, eyes always scanning, always assessing. She had that sense, the feeling something wasn't right, and radioed it in. But it was too late. The IED detonated beneath the second vehicle. The blast sent fire and smoke screaming into the mountains, flipping the truck and throwing debris through the air. Her Humvee slammed to a stop. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs. She remembered dragging Corporal Duane out by the collar. He was screaming, blood gushing from his leg. Sergeant Holt was already dead, hit square in the chest. The mountain was alive with gunfire. They were caught in a death funnel. Nowhere to run, no high ground to take. Their radio had been fried. In the blast, the fourth vehicle had tried to push through, but took a hit too. She saw flames swallowing it whole dot, so she ran. Lily grabbed Duane, propped his weight on her shoulders, and dragged him behind a jagged rock wall. Then she went back for Jenkins. Private Jenkins was only 19. He'd been clipped in the arm and couldn't hold his rifle. She slapped a bandage on him, handed him a pistol, and gave him a direct order. Shoot anything that moves, but don't stand up. Her voice had been pure steel. Even as bullets smacked the rocks around them, she kept moving. She was faster than fear. That's what she told herself. They were trapped for hours. Night fell, and with it came the cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your fingers stop working. They huddled together for warmth. No food. No radio. No ADEVAC. Just survival. On the second day, Jenkins went silent. Fever, blood loss, delirium. He whispered about his mom, about a dog named Rusty. Then he just stopped. She kept slapping his face, screaming at him to stay awake. But she knew. Duane was fading too. His leg had gone dark. The cold was a blessing now. It slowed the infection. She didn't sleep, didn't dare. She sharpened a stick with her knife, turned it into a stake, and held it like a spear. Every shadow on the ridge was an enemy. Every sound in the dark, a ghost. By the third day, she made a decision. If they stayed, they'd die. So she lifted Duane, unconscious, nearly frozen, and carried him. Her feet bled in her boots. Her side ached from shrapnel she hadn't even noticed. She followed a ridgeline, memorized from a blurry map during mission prep. It was a gamble, but she took it. For 4 hours she walked, half carrying, half dragging, until she found the ridge with the white stone marker, a signal point used in training. She lit a flare with shaking hands. When the bird arrived, she collapsed. Back in the present, Lily blinked slowly, returning to the bar. Joe stood quietly behind the counter. He hadn't spoken in 10 minutes, watching her as she drifted into memory. You go back there a lot? He asked softly. She nodded. Every night, she said. Jenkins didn't make it, did he? Her jaw tightened. No. Joe poured her another water. No words needed. He knew grief. His came from Da Nang and jungle ambushes. Hers from mountain ridges and modern politics. Different wars, same ghosts. The next day, a reporter showed up. A young woman in her 30s with a notepad, a hopeful smile, and a voice too chipper for the room. Hi, I'm with the American Valor Weekly. I heard Sergeant Monroe was here. The bar went still. Heads turned to Lily, who sat at her usual stool. Whatever you heard, Lily said coolly. Leave it at that. I just wanted to share. Your story, the reporter said. Women like you. You don't know me, Lily interrupted. I can tell your story, right? The country deserves to know. Lily stood up. No, she said. The country deserves to listen, but it rarely does. The reporter left. Embarrassed, a little wiser, but her presence sparked more discussion. That night, veterans filled the Daggett bar. Older ones, younger ones. Some had served in the Gulf, others in Somalia, Iraq, Syria. All had scars, physical or otherwise. And they saw in Lily what they rarely saw reflected back at them. Dignity, without performance. She wasn't there to be famous. She was there because she didn't want to be alone. And slowly, they began to sit near her. Not out of obligation, but out of understanding. They didn't ask about medals. They asked about the cold. They asked about the silence. They asked what to do when the memories didn't stop. And Lily, for the first time in years, answered not as a hero, but as one of them. The following Friday, Rusty's bar felt different. What was once a place for surface-level banter and cheap jokes had grown quieter, more thoughtful. The same men who once filled the air with mock bravado now sat in more honest conversations. No more teasing the rookies. No more laughing at tears. They'd changed because Lily Monroe had walked in and, without asking for anything, forced everyone to see themselves. She never preached. She never scolded. But her presence, her scars, her silence, reminded them of the weight they all carried, but rarely acknowledged. And that night, something unexpected happened. A general walked in. He was tall, older, wearing a civilian coat, but unmistakably military. The posture, the demeanor, the trimmed white hair all screamed authority. People recognized him instantly. Brigadier General David Kellerman. He'd served 35 years, led operations across Iraq and Afghanistan, and was now retired mostly. No one knew why he was there, until he crossed the room and stopped at Lily's stool. Looked up, surprised. Not alarmed, nothing startled Lily, but curious. "Sergeant Monroe," he said, offering his hand. "It's been a long time." She stood and shook it. "Didn't expect to see you here, sir," she replied. "I owed you a word," he said. The entire bar fell silent. Forks stopped clinking. A few stools creaked as people turned. No one wanted to interrupt. "I read about what happened here last week," the general said. "Someone told me a woman was sitting quietly in a bar full of loud veterans, and instead of boasting, she let her scars speak." Lily didn't answer. She didn't need to. The general turned to the bar. "You all mocked a soldier who's carried more on her back than most of you ever will." Murmurs rose. He continued. "She dragged 2 men through a kill zone. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't freeze. She moved, and because she moved, people lived." He looked around the room, then back at Lily, and she never asked for recognition. That's exactly why she deserves it. Lily sighed softly. "I didn't do it to be remembered," she said. The general nodded. "Which is why we should never forget." He took a seat beside her. The men and women in the bar, some with medals pinned to old jackets, some with fresh ink on their forearms, listened closely. Kellerman leaned forward. "I was in the joint. Ops Center the night we lost contact with Ridgeback Ridge," he said. "Watched your convoy disappear off the feed. 3 days, we thought you were gone." Lily's fingers tightened around her glass. "Almost was. I read your field report later," he continued. "But that didn't explain everything. What you did can't be captured in paperwork." For the first time, Lily's voice cracked, just slightly. "I wasn't supposed to survive. Jenkins didn't. Holt didn't. I just kept going because ... If I stopped, I'd die. It wasn't bravery. It was instinct." "Instinct is what separates survivors from names on a wall," Kellerman replied. A beat passed. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Finally, someone at the bar stood up. It was Mark, the young veteran who once sat beside her in silence. His voice shook a little. "Why didn't anyone tell us her story? Why don't we hear about people like her?" The general sighed. "Because the real ones usually stay quiet, and the media prefers noise over substance." Lily turned to Mark. "We're trained to fight, not to brag," she said. "And most of us don't want to relive it." "There's no glory in remembering the worst day of your life." Mark nodded, eyes brimming. Others around him, young and old, did the same. That night, the stories flowed, not the exaggerated kind, with hero music. And explosions, real stories, of broken nights. Of brothers lost. Of things they'd seen and couldn't unsee. One woman spoke of being medevaced after a mortar hit their base. Another man talked about leaving behind a translator who begged to escape. A Marine whispered about watching a friend step on a mine. And Lily? She listened, really listened. Then she spoke, not as a hero, but as someone who had seen the same pain reflected in 100 different pairs of eyes. When the night was over, Kellerman stood and said something no one expected. "I'm putting your name back in for the Distinguished Service Cross," he said. Lily froze. "No," she said instantly. "I didn't come here for that." "I know," the general replied. "But maybe it's not just for you. Maybe it's for the people you carried. Maybe they deserve to have someone like you remembered." Lily didn't answer. But for the first time in years, she didn't say no either. After Kellerman left, Joe poured her one last water for the road. "That was something," he said. She shrugged. "He always liked speeches." Joe smiled. "You don't, but you still changed this place. More than he ever could." She gave him a tired smile, picked up her jacket, and walked toward the door, the same door she'd walked in through weeks ago, to laughter and ignorance. Now, every person stood as she passed, not because she asked, but because they understood. The general's visit changed everything. Word spread fast, not just in Rusty's bar, but throughout the entire town. Stories that had once been confined to war files and confidential debriefings were now whispered over coffee, shared and hushed. Tones between veterans, and reposted on social media by people who didn't even know her. Lily Monroe's name was no longer just a headline buried in old military forums. It had surfaced raw and alive in a way she never intended. And it made her uncomfortable. She hadn't asked to be a symbol. She just wanted silence, peace, and a place to exist without explanation. But now, strangers approached her. At the grocery store, a woman in her 60s grabbed her hand and whispered, "My son never came home." "Thank you for yours." Lily didn't know what to say. She just nodded, her chest tightening. A teenage boy followed her out of a pharmacy to ask if it was true she fought with a knife for 2 days. She shook her head. It was a bayonet. The rifle jammed. His eyes went wide like she was an action figure. Worse were the cameras. A local TV station left a message asking for an exclusive interview. She deleted it without replying. The bar, once her place of anonymity, now hosted people she'd never seen before: curious visitors, distant veterans, even college students studying modern war narratives. One evening, a man brought his wife and kids just to point Lily out at a distance. "That's her," he whispered. "She's the one I told you about." She clenched her jaw and left early that night. She hadn't survived hell to become someone's curiosity. That Saturday, Joe found her outside the bar, sitting alone on the back steps, hood up, a cigarette between her fingers. She didn't smoke. Often only when the noise in her head got too loud. "Too much attention?" he asked, leaning against the brick wall beside her. "I didn't ask for this," she muttered. "I didn't come here to inspire anyone." "I know," Joe said. "But you did, whether you meant to or not." She flicked ash into the wind. "They don't want the truth. They want the myth. They want me to be strong and clean, polished, not sleepless and broken and full of guilt." Joe was silent a moment. "Maybe they don't need the myth," he said. "Maybe they need the real you." She didn't answer, but she didn't disagree either. The next evening, a man came in no one recognized, broad-shouldered, early 40s, wearing a jacket that bore the 173rd Airborne patch. His hair was cut close, and his eyes had that 1,000-yard stare that didn't come from staring at nothing. It came from seeing too much. He walked straight to Lily and sat beside her. "You dragged my brother out," he said. She turned, eyebrows raised. "Dwayne," he said. "Dwayne Monroe. Funer." Her breath caught. "You're his brother?" "Yeah," the man said. "He doesn't talk about it. Just says you saved his life." Lily stared at the counter. "He was already gone when we got to the hospital." She whispered, "I know." They sat in silence. "I wanted to hate you," the man said, "for being alive when he wasn't. I wanted to think. Maybe you failed him." Lily said nothing. "But then I read your report. I saw the pictures. I heard from the men who saw you walk out of that valley with his body on your back." Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them under the counter. The man continued, softer. "Now, you didn't fail him. You honored him. You carried him. All the way." Lily's voice was hoarse. "He deserved more than I could give. You gave him everything." He placed a photo on the bar. It was a picture of Dwayne, 6 months before deployment, laughing with his dog in his lap. His smile was full, unburdened, human. "I thought you should have this," the brother said. Lily held it carefully, like it might tear if she breathed too hard. "Thank you," she whispered. He stood and left without another word. Joe walked over slowly. "You okay?" Lily stared at the photo, her thumb tracing the corner. "I forgot what he looked like before the blood," she murmured. Joe nodded. "It's good to remember them whole." That night, for the first time, Lily stayed late. She told the bar a story, not of the ambush, not of survival, but of Dwayne. The way he used to sing horribly off-key. How he once tried to prank her, and ended up with pepper spray in his eyes. How he kept a photo of his mother in his helmet. She spoke softly, but the room was completely silent. People didn't listen like it was a war story. They listened like it was a prayer. After that night, the stories in the bar changed again. They weren't about who had the biggest scar or the wildest combat tale. They were about people, real people, the ones they'd lost, the ones they'd loved, the ones they wished they could forget, but knew they never would. And Lily? She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was the keeper of names, the one who remembered. Not for glory. But for them. By now, Lily Monroe had become a quiet pillar of the community, though she'd never admit it. She didn't lecture or lead. She didn't wear a hero's mask. But every week, the same stool near the end of the bar was occupied by the woman with the quiet eyes and the silent scars. And every week, more people found their way to her, not because she spoke loudly, but because she listened like no one else ever had. Even those who once laughed, those who sneered when she first entered, came back with lowered eyes and heavier hearts. It started with Chuck, the loudest of the original mockers. He walked in late one night, hat in hand, not touching a drop of beer. His voice cracked the silence with uncertainty. "Monroe?" he asked. Lily looked over, her expression unreadable. I came to say I'm sorry. I was out of line. I was stupid. Truth is, I saw your scars, and they scared me." She raised an eyebrow. "Scars scared you?" He nodded slowly. "They reminded me of the ones I don't show." She looked at him, more curious than cold now. "Then why make jokes?" she asked. "Because shame makes cowards of men." Chuck sat 2 stools away, not presuming to be near her, just close enough to speak. "My son joined the army in '08, he said. "Didn't make it back from Mosul. I never served. I felt like a fraud ever since." He took a deep breath. "I see you here, and you make it look easy. Like maybe pain doesn't always have to own you." Lily stared down at her water glass, swirling it slightly. "It doesn't," she said. "But it never lets go. It just shifts. He nodded. Double quotes. Thanks for not telling me to leave. I figured silence was enough of a lesson, she said. From that moment, other stories began to unfold. A woman named Teresa, a former Air Force medic, opened up one night after hearing Lily speak just 4 words to someone. You were there. 2. That phrase had done more than any therapy session. Teresa began talking about a helicopter crash in Kandahar that killed her fiancé. She'd buried the grief under work, beneath alcohol, beneath silence, until Lily reminded her that memories don't heal in hiding. Another regular, Javi, finally shared why he always sat facing the door. His PTSD wasn't from battle. It was from being the only one to survive an inside attack on base. These weren't stories told for attention. They were shared because someone finally created a space where they could land without judgment, without being patched over by thank you for your service, or drowned under awkward silence. Lily didn't give advice. She just listened. Sometimes that was all they needed, but sometimes someone needed her to say the hard truths, like when Mark, the young veteran with the chest scars, confessed he'd thought about ending it last winter. Lily didn't flinch. Why didn't you? She asked plainly. He blinked. I don't know. Maybe I thought no one would remember me. She stared at him hard. Then make yourself unforgettable. Not by what you did, but by who you help now. Mark stared at the floor, then nodded. Slowly, he started showing up to the bar more often. Not to drink, but to talk to the newer veterans who wandered in, lost and unsure. He became someone's first listener, because Lily had been his and the ripple effect continued. Joe, the bartender, who once only served drinks and wiped down the counter, started organizing veteran nights, free food, quiet music. A box where people could leave anonymous letters about things they couldn't say aloud. One of those notes simply read, I haven't spoken my brother's name out loud in 7 years. Until now. And then there was the wall. It started as an idea from Javi. A corner of the bar near the old jukebox was cleared and painted black. Above it, gold letters spelled out, the names we carry. People began pinning photos, dog tags, unit patches, old letters. One man left a worn baseball glove tagged with his buddy's name, who never came back from Fallujah. A woman placed her father's bronze star under a photo of him smiling in uniform. He'd passed from cancer caused by exposure. In the Gulf War, Lily didn't contribute at first. She said she didn't need to. But one night, long after closing, she walked to the wall and taped a single item there. A crumpled, sun-bleached candy wrapper. Just an ordinary wrapper. Joe asked her the next day, what's that about? She smiled faintly. Jenkins, she said. He gave me the last piece of chocolate he had in that valley. Told me to save it for when we got out alive. Joe nodded slowly, his voice low. You kept it? Reminded me that hope doesn't always come wrapped in metals. And from then on, no one touched that wrapper. It stayed. Like him. Like her story. That Friday, the bar was packed again. But no one yelled. No one mocked. It wasn't the kind of bar that needed loud anymore. Instead, it had become something else, something sacred. A place where pain didn't need to be hidden. Where silence didn't mean shame. Where scars, visible or not, were met with recognition instead of ridicule. And at the heart of it all was Lily Monroe, the woman they once mocked, the one who never asked for anything, the one who simply came in, sat down, and reminded them by example how to live again. The official letter arrived on a Wednesday. It was thin, typed, impersonal, but the name on the envelope said everything. To Sergeant Lily Monroe, Ret. She stared at it for 2 full minutes before opening it. Inside was a notice from the monarch. Department of Defense. Her application resubmitted quietly by General Kellerman had been approved. The Distinguished Service Cross would be awarded to her at a regional military honors event the following month. The ceremony would be public. Press would attend. Names would be read. Speeches would be made. Lily held the letter in her hand for a long while, the paper trembling just slightly. She wasn't sure if it felt like an honor or a weight. She took it to Joe that evening, sliding it across the bar like it was something cursed. "They're finally giving it to me," she said. Joe read it, let out a low whistle, and gave her a look that was part admiration, part caution. "You gonna accept it?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "They want me to wear my dress uniform," she muttered. Joe raised an eyebrow. "Still got it? In a box, beneath other boxes. Do you want this?" he asked softly. Lily exhaled. "I don't know. I did what I had to. That doesn't feel like something to celebrate." Joe leaned closer. "Maybe it's not about celebrating what you did," he said. "Maybe it's about making sure no one forgets what others didn't survive." That struck a nerve. She thought of Jenkins, of Dwayne, of Holt, who died in the blast before she could even blink. What would it mean to accept a medal for surviving when others never got the chance? Then again, what would it mean to reject it again and let their story remain unspoken? The bar knew about the letter within 48 hours. It wasn't gossip. It was reverence. No one brought it up directly, but word spread like smoke. When Lily walked in, conversations lowered. People nodded with quiet pride. Some left small notes for her under their glasses, just saying, "Thank you." Then Mark spoke up one night. He stood beside the wall of remembrance and raised his glass. "I know. She hates attention," he said with a nervous smile. "But Sergeant Monroe getting this medal doesn't just honor her. It honors all of us. Every scar, every ghost, every night we didn't think we'd make it. She carries us." Lily looked down, flushed, but didn't stop him. He raised his glass higher, to Lily. The whole bar echoed it, to Lily. She didn't cry, but her voice shook when she whispered, "Thank you." The night of the ceremony arrived a few weeks later. Lily hadn't worn her dress uniform in over a decade. She had to iron it twice, re-stitch a name tag, and Polish boots that hadn't seen daylight since the war. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because of age, but because of how far she'd come. The pain hadn't left, but she was no longer alone in it. Joe drove her to the event. The auditorium was full veterans, families, generals, young soldiers, and aging warriors who walked with canes and memories. The program was long. Dozens were honored. But when Lily's name was called, the room changed. There was a hush that wasn't forced, it was reverent. She walked across the stage, eyes forward, every step steady. A general met her halfway, holding the Distinguished Service Cross in a small velvet box. Cameras flashed, but she didn't see them. She saw Holt. Jenkins. Dwayne. And the dark ridge of Cunor, still etched behind her eyes. Kellerman pinned at the medal and leaned in quietly. "You didn't ask for this," he said, "but you earned it. And now they'll remember." She nodded once. She didn't smile, but she stood a little taller. The applause was thunderous. Not just for her, but for every name that was never called. After the ceremony, a woman in her 20s approached her. Thin, pale, with tired eyes and nervous hands. "My brother was in your unit," she whispered. "Private Jenkins." Lily froze. The girl reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He used to write me letters every week. Said you were the only one who treated him like he mattered." Lily's throat closed. He said, "If anything ever happened, you'd be the one to get him home." Lily swallowed hard. "I tried." "I?" "No," the girl whispered. "He said he trusted you with his life. I'm just glad he was right. That night, back at the bar, Lily walked in wearing her uniform. For the first time ever, she didn't sit at the edge. She sat centered, surrounded. Joe placed a photo behind the bar. It was Lily, on stage, the medal freshly pinned. Below it, he'd written in gold marker, "She carried more than just men. She carried their memory." The regulars raised a toast. No speeches. Just the clink of glasses. And silence. The good kind. The kind earned by presence, not noise. That night, Lily finally allowed herself to speak of Jenkins again. His laugh, his fear, the way he whispered his sister's name before he died. She cried softly. No. One turned away, and no one pitied her. They cried too, because it was real, because it mattered. Because finally, they knew. Some heroes don't wear capes. They just sit quietly, waiting for someone to ask. A month had passed since the ceremony, but the medal wasn't displayed. It wasn't framed. It wasn't polished. It sat tucked in the bottom drawer of Lily Monroe's knitstand, beside a folded flag, a silver lighter, and a faded photograph of 4 soldiers grinning on a mountaintop. She didn't need it on her wall. The recognition hadn't changed who she was, but it had changed what people saw when they looked at her. They no longer saw a mystery. They saw a mirror, one that reflected pieces of their own pain, their own survival. And for Lily, that was enough. At Rusty's bar, the wall of remembrance had grown. Every week, someone added something new, a name, a token, a memory, a boop with initials scrawled on the sole, a drawing from a 5-year-old whose dad went to heaven in uniform, a napkin scribbled with a call sign and a date. People didn't come to drink anymore. They came to feel. They came to remember. And it started, all of it, with one woman walking into a bar full of people who didn't know what pain looked like. Until they saw it in her scars. One night, Joe approached her with an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, taking it cautiously. "It's from a school," he said. "High school in Ohio. Teacher saw your story online. Wants you to speak to her class." Lily scoffed lightly. "I'm not a speaker, Joe." "Didn't think you were a bar regular either," he replied with a smirk. She turned the envelope in her hands, thinking, they probably want something clean, something proud. They probably want something real, he said. "And you've got more of that than anyone I know." She didn't say yes, but she didn't throw the letter away either. Later that week, she stood outside the bar as the sun sank behind the trees. It was quiet, the good kind of quiet, a stillness she used to only find out in the mountains. Mark joined her with 2 paper coffees. He handed her one and sat beside her on the steps. "I got a job offer," he said. "VA peer support counselor. I'm thinking about taking it." Lily sipped her coffee, nodded slowly. "You should," she said. "You're ready," he smiled. "I wouldn't be if it weren't for you." She looked at him with quiet pride. "You were always capable, Mark. You just forgot." A truck pulled into the parking lot. From it stepped a young man, barely 20. Hair buzzed, uniform still crisp. He looked nervous, eyes scanning the bar like he wasn't sure if he belonged there. Mark stood and called to him. "You looking for someone?" The kid nodded, hesitating. I heard this is where veterans go when they can't talk anywhere else." Mark smiled. "You heard right." He waved him in, and before Lily could say anything, Mark turned to her. "You're the reason he came." She didn't respond. She just looked down at her scarred hands, then back at the kid, and gave a nod. The following week, Lily made her first trip out of town in years. The Ohio school sat in a modest suburb. The gym was full of students. Some bored, some curious, most unaware of what they were about to hear. When Lily stepped up to the microphone, she didn't give them a textbook speech. No salute, no dramatic music. She told them about Jenkins. About the cold nights on the ridge. About carrying a man until her legs gave out. About the silence that followed the firefight, louder than the other bullets. She didn't cry, but several students did, not because she asked them to, but because her truth left no room for pretending. After the talk, a girl approached her, red-eyed and trembling. My brother came home last year. He won't talk to us. He doesn't sleep. He drinks too much. I didn't know how to help. Lily placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Tell him you're not afraid to listen, she said, even if he never says a word. The girl nodded. And that was all it took. Back at Rusty's, business had changed, but no one minded. Veterans began traveling from out of state just to see the wall. People began calling it the Healing Bar. An article in Stars and Stripes featured Lily, not as a decorated soldier, but as a quiet force who created something sacred by simply showing up. But Lily never claimed it. She always said, "It wasn't me. It was the space." People were just waiting for someone to open the door. One evening, Joe found her again, sitting by herself with her boots propped up. "You ever think about leaving town?" he asked. She shook her head. "This place needs people who remember." "And you?" he said. "Do you need to forget?" She looked up at the wall, at the candy wrapper she'd taped months ago, still untouched. "No," she said quietly. "I need to carry them. Every single one." He nodded. "That's what makes you who you are." As the night wore on, more people filled the bar. Some in uniform, some with canes, some barely old enough to drink, yet already old in the eyes. Lily didn't sit at the corner anymore. She sat in the middle, surrounded by voices, stories, and memories. Not leading, not preaching, just being. The woman they once mocked, now the one they leaned on. And as the lights dimmed, someone raised a glass, not to war, not to victory, but to the scars that made them human. And to the woman who reminded them that survival is not shame. That silence can heal. And that strength wears many faces, even the quiet ones. End of story.